At 80 years old, Margaret Lawson faced a decision that many seniors dread, choosing how and where to spend the remaining years of her life. For decades, she had been fiercely independent, managing her own home, handling daily responsibilities, and staying active in her community. But after a fall on her front porch left her with a fractured hip, everything changed. Her two children, Emily and Jason, both successful professionals living in different states, grew increasingly concerned. "Mom, you can't keep living alone. It's too dangerous," Emily insisted over a phone call. Jason agreed. "We should start looking at options, maybe moving in with one of us, hiring a caregiver, or considering a retirement home." Margaret resisted. The thought of leaving her home, filled with decades of memories, was painful. However, as her recovery progressed, she had to accept the truth. Living alone was becoming a risk she could no longer ignore. This led her to explore her three primary options: moving in with one of her children, hiring in-home care, or transitioning to an assisted living facility. Each choice seemed practical on the surface, but as she would soon learn, reality was far more complicated. Margaret's first attempt was moving in with Emily. Her daughter had a spacious home in Seattle, complete with a guest suite, and was eager to help. "It will be great, Mom. You'll have everything you need, and we'll be here to take care of you," Emily reassured her. For the first week, everything seemed perfect. Margaret was grateful to be surrounded by family, and she tried to adapt to their routine. But soon, the cracks began to show. Emily and her husband, David, were busy professionals with demanding schedules. Their teenage kids had activities every evening, leaving Margaret alone for long stretches. Meals were often rushed or left for her to prepare herself. The family had different sleep schedules, and simple things, like watching TV late at night, became a source of tension. Margaret also began noticing subtle frustrations from her daughter. One evening, after Margaret asked for help reaching something in the kitchen, she overheard Emily sigh and mutter to her husband, "I feel like I have another child to take care of." Those words cut deep. She had spent her life raising and providing for her children, never wanting to be a burden. And now, despite their good intentions, she could feel the strain her presence was placing on their lives. After 2 months, she made a difficult decision. "Emily, I love you, but this isn't working for either of us," she admitted. Emily, though relieved in some ways, looked heartbroken. "I just wanted to help, Mom," she whispered. With a heavy heart, Margaret packed her bags and returned to her home. But the question remained, what next? Living alone was still unsafe, and moving in with Jason, who lived across the country, was not a practical option. That's when she began considering in-home care. Hiring a professional caregiver seemed like an ideal solution. Someone to assist with daily tasks, ensure her safety, and provide companionship without uprooting her life. But as she would soon discover, this option came with its own set of challenges. After realizing that living with her children wasn't a sustainable solution, Margaret Lawson turned to what seemed like the next best option: hiring an in-home caregiver. It felt like the perfect balance. She could stay in the comfort of her own home while receiving the support she needed for daily tasks. But what seemed ideal on paper quickly became a lesson in the hidden realities of elder care. Margaret's children helped her research home care agencies, and they finally settled on a reputable company that promised personalized assistance. The agency assigned a caregiver named Linda, a middle-aged woman with years of experience in elder care. "Don't worry, Mrs. Lawson. I'll take good care of you," Linda said with a reassuring smile during their first meeting. At first, Margaret was relieved. Linda helped with cooking, light cleaning, and transportation to doctor's appointments. But after just a few weeks, cracks started to appear. The first problem was the cost. At $30 per hour, even just 4 hours a day quickly added up to nearly $4,000 a month, far exceeding Margaret's Social Security and pension income. "Mom, this isn't sustainable," Jason warned. "You'll burn through your savings in just a few years." Emily echoed his concern. "Maybe we should consider a different approach, like a part-time caregiver or a retirement community." Margaret felt torn. She had always been financially responsible, but her independence was slipping away. "What's the point of saving money if I can't use it for my own well-being?" she reasoned. But deep down, she feared running out of funds and becoming a financial burden to her children. Beyond the financial strain, there were unexpected emotional challenges. Margaret had always been a private person, and suddenly having a caregiver in her home made her feel like a guest in her own space. She missed the simple freedom of making her own coffee without someone watching, or sitting quietly without feeling the need to entertain a visitor. Then came the revolving door of caregivers. After just a month, Linda left for another position. The agency quickly replaced her with a new caregiver, then another and another. Each time, Margaret had to adjust to a stranger in her home, explain her preferences, and rebuild a sense of trust, all just to have the cycle repeat a few weeks later. Some caregivers were wonderful, treating Margaret with kindness and patience. Others were distant, treating their time with her as just another shift to get through. One young caregiver, Sarah, spent more time on her phone than actually assisting Margaret. "I'm paying for company, but I still feel alone," she confided in Emily during one of their calls. The biggest blow came one night when Margaret slipped in the bathroom. Fortunately, she was not seriously hurt, but it took her nearly 30 minutes to get back on her feet. The realization hit hard. Despite paying thousands for care, she was still alone and vulnerable for most of the day. "This isn't working," she told her children. "I thought having a caregiver would give me peace of mind, but I feel more isolated than ever." That's when Emily brought up a new idea, an assisted living facility. "Mom, it's not like a nursing home. It's a community where you'll have help when you need it, but also people to socialize with. Maybe it's worth considering." Reluctantly, Margaret agreed to take a tour. She never imagined herself in a retirement home, but with her options dwindling, she had no choice but to consider it. Little did she know, this next decision would bring challenges she never expected. Margaret Lawson never thought she would step foot in an assisted living facility, let alone consider living in one. But after her struggles with in-home care, she agreed to visit a highly rated senior community near her daughter's home in North Carolina. On the day of the tour, Emily accompanied her to Maplewood Senior Living, a modern and beautifully designed facility with lush gardens, spacious common areas, and friendly staff. The moment they walked in, a cheerful young woman at the front desk welcomed them. "We're so glad you're here, Mrs. Lawson. You're going to love it." The sales representative, a well-dressed man in his 40s, led them through the facility, highlighting its many amenities. "We have daily activities, fitness programs, and gourmet dining prepared by professional chefs. There's even a movie theater on site. And of course, our staff is available 24/7 to assist with anything you might need." Margaret listened politely, nodding in all the right places, but deep inside, she felt uneasy. Everything looked perfect on the surface, too perfect. It reminded her of a fancy hotel, one where the guests came and went, but she would be staying for good. When they arrived at a model apartment, Emily turned to her with an encouraging smile. "Look, Mom, it's spacious and bright. You could decorate it just like home." Margaret glanced around the room. It was clean, modern, and efficient, but it didn't feel like home. It lacked the warmth of her old house, the smell of her favorite candles, and the familiar creak of her wooden floors. Still, she forced herself to be open-minded. After all, staying in her house alone wasn't an option anymore. She agreed to a trial stay, a 1-month residency, to see if she could adjust. Emily and Jason were thrilled. "This could be a fresh start for you, Mom," Jason said optimistically. The first few weeks, a false sense of comfort. At first, everything seemed fine. The staff was attentive, and the other residents were friendly. Margaret met a woman named Barbara, a retired teacher, who invited her to sit with her during meals. "You'll get used to this place," Barbara reassured her. "It's not home, but it's comfortable." The food was surprisingly good, and the structured schedule kept her from feeling lonely. She even participated in a book club and attended a painting class, both of which helped distract her from the nagging feeling that she didn't truly belong. However, as the days went on, the small inconveniences began to pile up. One evening, Margaret requested assistance with adjusting her thermostat. "A staff member will be right up," they told her. She waited nearly an hour before someone arrived. Another time, she asked for help carrying her laundry, but the staff was so busy that she ended up struggling to do it herself. Then, there was the lack of privacy. Staff members entered her room unannounced, sometimes knocking, but barely waiting for a response before stepping inside. "Mrs. Lawson, it's time for your medication," a young aide would say, placing a cup of pills on her nightstand. Margaret understood the need for structure, but she started to feel more like a patient than a resident. She missed being able to decide her own schedule, rather than following one set by the facility. The final straw came when she overheard a disturbing conversation in the hallway. "I heard they're increasing the monthly fees again," one staff member whispered to another. "A few residents are already worried about affording it." Margaret's heart sank. She had budgeted carefully for this move, but if the costs kept rising, would she be forced to leave? For the first time, she realized this might not be the safe, permanent solution she had hoped for. Instead of feeling relieved, she felt trapped in yet another situation she couldn't fully control. That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, wondering, had she made another mistake? Margaret Lawson had entered Maplewood Senior Living with the hope of finding stability, but after only a few weeks, she felt like she had lost control of her life. At first, she tried to stay optimistic. She reminded herself that this was better than struggling alone in her home. The staff was professional, and the residents were friendly. She had even started attending group activities, trying her best to fit into this new world. But as time went on, the small inconveniences turned into real frustrations. One morning, Margaret woke up with a sharp pain in her lower back. She pressed the emergency call button beside her bed, expecting help to arrive quickly. 30 minutes passed, then 45. Finally, an aide knocked and entered, offering a generic apology. "I'm so sorry for the delay, Mrs. Lawson," she said. "We're short-staffed today." Margaret was shocked. Short-staffed? What did that mean for emergencies? She had read in the brochures that medical assistance was available 24/7, but now it was clear that staffing shortages affected the level of care. The realization made her uneasy. What if she had fallen? What if she had a medical crisis in the middle of the night? Would anyone even notice in time? Beyond the slow response times, Margaret felt her independence slipping away. She had always enjoyed her morning walks, but now she needed permission to leave the building. Every outing required paperwork, approval, and a staff escort if she wanted to go beyond the facility grounds. One afternoon, she decided to take a short stroll outside. The fresh air felt wonderful, but when she reached the entrance, a staff member stopped her. "Mrs. Lawson, where are you headed?" "Just a short walk around the garden," she replied. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to check with the front desk first. It's for your safety." Margaret sighed. Her safety? She had spent 80 years making her own decisions, but now even a simple walk required approval. At meal times, the limitations continued. She had always loved cooking, but here, she had no control over her own food. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were served at set times, with no exceptions. If she wasn't hungry when the meal was served, too bad. If she wanted a snack and not hour, she'd have to wait. One evening, Margaret wasn't feeling well and wanted to eat in her room. She requested a tray, but a staff member responded, "We encourage all residents to eat in the dining hall to maintain a routine." Margaret was furious. She wasn't a child. She wasn't a patient in a hospital. And yet, she was being treated like someone who couldn't make basic choices for herself. As Margaret adjusted to this new reality, another problem loomed: finances. She had saved carefully for retirement, but she hadn't anticipated the hidden costs. One day, she overheard two residents whispering in the hallway. "They're increasing the service fees again," one woman said. "I don't know how I'll afford it." Margaret's stomach sank. She immediately checked her contract, scanning for details about pricing. It was true. Fees could be raised at any time. When she asked the administrator about it, she received a polite but vague answer. "We adjust rates based on operational costs, Mrs. Lawson. It's standard in the industry." Margaret felt trapped. If costs continued to rise, she could run out of money. And then what? Would they force her to leave? Where'd she go? An unexpected awakening. That night, Margaret lay in bed, thinking about everything she had given up. She had traded her independence for what she thought would be security. But instead, she had lost control of her schedule, her finances, and even simple freedoms like taking a walk or choosing when to eat. Tears welled in her eyes as a thought crossed her mind. Had she made another mistake? Was there another option she hadn't considered? She didn't know the answer yet, but one thing was clear: she couldn't stay here forever. Margaret Lawson had spent her life making her own choices. But now, at 80 years old, she felt like she had lost control. Living at Maplewood Senior Living had seemed like the safest option after her fall at home. But now, after months of feeling trapped by strict schedules, hidden fees, and a loss of independence, Margaret had reached a breaking point. She lay in bed one night, staring at the ceiling, wondering, was this really how she wanted to spend the rest of her life? She had always believed in finding solutions, not just accepting problems. And if the life she had now wasn't what she wanted, she needed to find a way to change it. The next morning, Margaret made a bold decision. She called her old neighbor, Linda, who had lived alone for years but still seemed happy and independent. "Linda, how do you manage on your own?" she asked. Linda chuckled. "Margaret, I have a secret. I don't live alone." Margaret was confused. "But I thought you never moved into a senior home." "I didn't," Linda explained. "I hired a part-time caregiver, but not through a big company. I found a local college student who helps me with groceries, drives me to appointments, and checks in every day. It's affordable, and I still have my freedom." Margaret was stunned. She had assumed that aging meant two choices: a retirement home or being a burden to family. But Linda had found a third way: independent living with personalized support. Inspired by Linda's approach, Margaret started researching options. She discovered that many seniors were choosing to age in place by hiring part-time assistants, sharing homes with other seniors, or even moving into small apartments near family without depending on them for daily care. She realized she still had a choice. Instead of staying at Maplewood Senior Living, where she felt like a passive resident, she could design a life that worked for her. 1 month later, Margaret packed her bags. She moved into a smaller apartment in her old neighborhood, close enough to see friends and family, but with the independence she craved. She found a local helper, a retired nurse who worked part-time, who visited daily to assist with small tasks. The cost? Half of what she had paid at Maplewood. The best part? She was back in control. Margaret's journey makes us wonder, how do you picture your own future? Would you prefer a structured community, or do you value independence and flexibility? What do you think is the best way to balance safety and freedom as we age? Tell us in the comments. Where do you live, and what options do seniors have in your area? Are there unique solutions available? Or do people struggle with the same choices? We would love to hear from you. Margaret's story isn't just about one woman. It's a lesson for all of us. Aging is not about losing choices. It's about making the right ones. If this video made you think, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us share more real-life stories and solutions. And don't forget to share this video with someone who might need it. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.